last night. I've been getting a lot of questions from everyone lately how salt came about in the world. It's a really interesting story actually because not many people know it. Everyone thinks it's all science and chemicals and stuff, but really salt came about in the early 1800s. So believe it or not, they didn't have salt back in the day. They actually just used sand. They thought it was salt. It didn't taste like it, but it was like the same texture, I guess. You know the saying, take it with a grain of salt, a grain of sand. No one really knows which one's right. But so salt is actually, in the early 1800s, there was these pilgrims, and they were having Thanksgiving dinner, and they really wanted to spice up, may I say, their dinner. And so you can see on here, it might be a little bit backwards, but there's this woman walking in the rain, and it's backwards, but it says Morton. So Morton was the creator of salt. So Morton was a guy that he owned a barn. So it was different than a farm. He owned a barn. So he just had animals. And so he had like a goat and he had a pig. And I think those were the only two things that he had. But as you can see behind me, that it's a little dreary today. And it reminded me just of the story of how his day started out just like this one. So like I showed you, walking in the rain. So one day, the goat and the pig were just hanging out. And you know how when an animal steps, it makes an imprint in the ground. And what happened was the rain filled that puddle of footprint. And Morton, that's why the logo looks like this. His wife, actually, not mentioned on here, but she stepped in that same puddle, and her shoe created the first grain of salt. So the story really concludes here with that footprint, because it put it in the ground, essentially planting the first grain of salt. And ever since then, there was a great rain one day, and it kind of spread all over the United States, some more than others. So that's why you can only find salt in like Idaho. And actually Idaho produces all of the salt in the United States. Yeah, so long story short, you can thank Morton for creating salt. Actually, you can thank his wife for walking in the rain that one day. And that is the great story of salt.